Welcome to Beyond the Business Card podcast.
How can I help my company make some more money so that I can get my salary back? And it was that day, that evening, that I came up with the idea of Socialize.
Today's guest is Akanksha Goel, the founder and managing director of Socialize, one of the region's leading social media agencies. At 22 years old, Akanksha moved to Dubai and quickly made her mark, earning the title of an accidental entrepreneur in Gulf News.
Came to Dubai, and Dubai wasn't all that I thought it would be. Work was tricky. I didn't get paid my salary on time, many months.
Beyond building and selling to We Are Social, one of the region's most celebrated agencies, she's a passionate advocate for AI, Web3, and the creator economy, constantly pushing the boundaries of what's possible in the digital space. Let's dive into her journey, the lessons she's learned, and what continues to inspire her along the way. Akanksha, thanks for joining us on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Now, what we do in the show, as I explained to you earlier, is we talk about entrepreneurs. We Beyond the Business Card is the name of our show. We like to unearth and unpick the life of an entrepreneur, just to try and inspire the next generation of entrepreneurs and to help those who are getting into the entrepreneurship game to understand the good, the bad, the ugly of running a business. And I think a great place to start with yourself is obviously where your origin story. I know you were in Singapore, but I'd be delighted to hear more and more about that. So over to you.
When I heard you say behind the business card, I'm just going to take a bit of a tangent to say, I'm glad to be here. And it's nice to be sitting here and thinking a little bit about that person behind the business card, because I have been my business card for so long that I'm currently going through the stage where I'm wondering what stands behind it. But anyways, it was a thought. So going back to where it all started. So I was born in India. Small family, lovely family. My mom always wanted us to do more, wanted us to get out of the country and see more. So she applied to an ad in the newspaper from the Singapore government, which is looking for students from China and India to study in Singapore. And that was a scholarship by Singapore Airlines, which I won. And that took me to Singapore. And I think that's really where my life started. I was only 15. It was difficult being away from home. Life beat me up in Singapore a little bit, but I wanted to prove that I could do it. And I think that's where, first sort of had this big ambition and hunger to go out and do something more than go back home or go back to India, be more. And from Singapore, I was quite lucky. After university, I had a great first job, which actually I have to say is the best job I've ever had, and the best job anyone can have, which is being the editor of a magazine. I was the youngest ever editor-in-chief magazine. I had this section called The Big Boys' Toys, which is all about interviewing big boys and finding out about their toys. And one of the big boys that I interviewed was someone from Dubai who offered me a job to come to Dubai and head up marketing for their business, which was a job I took because I think I was ready for change. But I came to Dubai around the same time that I think you came to
That's
Dubai,
right, yeah.
Back in 2008, 2009.
Yeah.
Remember?
Yeah.
You had those car graveyards?
Yeah.
So came to Dubai, and Dubai wasn't all that I thought it would be. Work was tricky. I didn't get paid my salary on time, many months. And when I tried to leave, I got told that, I might get banned from coming into the country because it would take your passport away and such. So Dubai was weird, but Dubai is also a place that can give you a lot of opportunities. And I'm someone who's been, a student or a receiver of that. I went to work one day and got told that I would get a 30% salary cut. This was in the middle of those times. I went back home that evening and I thought, how can I help my company make some more money so that I can get my salary back? And it was that day, that evening, that I came up with the idea of Socialize, because all I wanted was to help the company make money so I could get my salary back. I was doing some moonlighting, teaching at Murdoch University, talking about Web 2.0 and personal branding, because that was something that I wrote my thesis on back in Singapore when I was studying there. I decided, well, what if I charged people for it? And that's how Socialize started. Socialize was meant to be a training company. I put up a tweet saying Middle East first social media training house launches. And because I would spend a lot of time on Twitter and I was one of the top 100 Twitterati, I got picked up by Campaign. And I did a twit pitch to all of the editors who were on Twitter back then saying Middle East first social media training house launches. And we got featured on the 5th page of Campaign magazine. And the next day got a call from Swarovski, who wanted me to go in and train the managing director. And that's how Socialize really started. And the ambition was to just make enough money so that I could get my salary back. However, Socialize started taking off, and I decided it was time to go and do it myself because the business that I was part of didn't really know what to do with Socialize. And I think I wanted to leave and get a visa. And I heard an ad on the radio from, do you remember Virtue Zone back in the day?
Yes.
And so I went there, wrote a business plan, got a license, still wanted to go back to Singapore. But after doing some work with Apple through Low, we got called by HP. And before I knew it, I stopped thinking about Singapore. And that was it. It just went from strength to strength. Worked out of my bedroom for a while. Got 2 interns off of Twitter. And I paid them by cooking breakfast and lunch. I can't believe I'm saying this. I haven't ever really said this. Till the security guard said, who are these 2 people who come into your apartment every day? I was like, my cousins. He didn't really buy that. But yes, I paid them by cooking breakfast sandwiches and lunches. I got very good at pastas. And then as we were taking off, once we realized how to actually charge HP and get paid from HP, we decided to rent an office. And within a year, I was able to go to TCOM and get our first office. And we changed 5 offices in 6 years. And now we're finally in our 6th office and we've been there for a while.
Wow.
Yes.
There you go.
Yes.
So much to unpack there. So look, I mean, what goes through my mind, first of all, wow, you got selected at 15 to move to Singapore and move away from your family. I mean, that's incredibly young age to sort of to leave everyone and go off on your own. So really interested to sort of understand what impact that had on your life. Then you're so blasé in how you moved, you became editor of a magazine, interested to know how that happened. And then obviously you moved to Dubai. The bit that I'm also intrigued by is a lot of people would, when you get your pay cut, when you realize Dubai is pretty tough or nothing like the glitterati that you thought it would be, why you stuck around. And then, of course, how you fell into entrepreneurship and seemed to just take it and run with it. So lots of interesting things to unpack there. But let's start. Why do you think it was you were selected at 15? What was the reason?
So, obviously, why I was selected is because my mom took the initiative to apply for it, honestly. Yeah. I did well in school. I ticked off all the boxes. I had extracurricular, all of that. Again, thanks to my mom, who really, wanted us to do more. And I answered the questions well and, all of those things. But I think I would say it was the initiative because there are a lot of brilliant people who could have gotten it. But I'm glad that I had the opportunity to even say a few things about myself and get that, get that scholarship where they paid for our travel, our food, our lodging, everything. It was the first time in our family even had a passport to get out of the country.
Wow.
And, I look sometimes at people who've gone to the US and UK or who've stayed at home and they've all sort of built on their strengths, but doing something like this, going to Singapore on a scholarship where you're studying further math, science, physics, further math is difficult. You get to really realize your weaknesses. And I think that's something I'm thankful for. It was tough being in Singapore. After the first year, I said to my parents, I don't think I can do it. It's really hard. With some of the most brilliant people around the world, it's like, I don't think I've got it. And my parents said, you're going to stay back and you're going to finish it. Mm-hmm. What do you want to do? Just come back to India? Like, this is your time. You can do it. We know you've got something in yourself. Go for it, fight. And I did. And it was tough, but I'm so glad I did because it made me tougher. So I think it was helpful to realize weaknesses. And how I got this job as the first ever editor-in-chief was because, part of that trying to prove yourself, you want to get out and do more. I was always, talking to professors to try and be their research assistant, teaching assistant, etc. Anyways, I'm telling you parts of this, there are parts that I'm probably not sharing, but there were times where I got to the absolute bottom in university. And I'm going to say this now because it's coming to me and because I've never said this before. And I think time has come, maybe 20 years, actually, 20 years. Yep. I was 17 when that happened. So just about 20 years later to be able to say this. I tried to kill myself when I was at scholarship in high school. It was very difficult to keep doing what I was doing. And I felt all of this pressure on myself to prove it, to make it. And I did this silly thing of having a lot of pills and hoping it would all go away. But as luck would have it, I found myself in a hospital the next day or 2 days later with the Minister of Health and the principal of our school being the first people to meet me. And in that moment, as I sat up on bed, I knew what I had to say, which is, I made a mistake. I made a mistake. No one had anything to do with this. It wasn't the teachers. It wasn't a boy. It wasn't my friends. It wasn't the government. I made a mistake. I had to see how my parents suffered with that news and say to them, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. That happened 2 years after I went to, or 1.5 years after I went to Singapore. So as I tell you the rest of the story, the truth is that it was that waking up the next day, realizing I failed, but also it's a gift. Here I am. And I think everything I've done for the next 20 years has been to prove to myself and to the world that I'm not a mess up, So I'm okay. And I'm thankful.
Well, I guess also after an experience like that, you are very thankful for waking up and grateful for everything that happens as a result of it, and want to make them. I mean, I've spoken to a lot of people that have had traumatic experiences in, car crashes, accidents, where you kind of get a new lease of life. I know it sounds a bit cliche, but you do get a new lease of life afterwards.
And it's such a funny thing. It's actually. It's a funny thing to even speak about this. It's very personal, but it's also one of those things that, as you just said, there's so many experiences that people go through. I went through this and it made me who I am. It gave me the new lease of life and a desire to fight. And then from there, the people around me have given me opportunities. We all get opportunities. We have to be able to see it. So, a professor of mine saying, I want to organize Asia's first podcamp. Will you help me with it? Yes, absolutely. Working in the evenings, getting a few people coming on board. We had Goel, who at that point was called the rock star of social media. This is back in the day in 2006, 2007. And I was helping my professor, with Mitch. And Mitch looked at me and said, interesting young girl. Can I have you on my podcast? And that was back in the day in 2006, 2007, the first podcast ever. It's called Twist to Marge.
Have you listened to it recently?
Gosh, I don't even know. I mean, I haven't. I haven't. And that's where it all started, because he asked me in the podcast, I said, Tommy, Akanksha, what are you doing now? I said, well, I'm a university student and I'm about to finish and I'm looking for a job. And I got a phone call and it was someone who said, I'm the publisher of, publisher. I've heard about you, heard about your podcast. Your professor also says really good things about you. I'm looking for the editor of my magazine. And I don't know if you can do it, but if you can get the first issue out, because I've heard good things, you've got the job. I got the first issue out. I barely slept. I called up every friend I had. I gave everyone a page of the magazine to make phone calls and find out prices, because you couldn't find prices on the internet back then. So we had to localize the stuff that was coming from Haymarket in London.
Wow.
And I did it. I got the first issue out. It was a men's magazine, Consumers Toys. And I was the only female, and I was younger than them, and as a woman editor. But when we went for a shoot for the cover image, I guess getting some really good pieces, bikini pieces and jewelry for the cover shoot, I guess everyone felt maybe I did have it in me to bring something different to the magazine. And I got the job. And that job gave me the opportunity to come to Dubai. And I guess in Dubai, getting the salary cut gave me the opportunity to start Socialize.
And it would have given you, I imagine, the experience you had in Singapore, it just gave you the courage to, when the Dubai opportunity came up, it was,
Yes.
you could have said yes in a heartbeat, because you'd already gone through so much in Singapore. What was, how tough is this going to be, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Actually, I've not thought of it that way, but you're right. It was that. And the reason, when the going got tough in Dubai, I think you mentioned that a lot of people, when the going gets tough, you just want to, why not leave?
They scarper. Yeah.
Why not leave? But I was the editor of a magazine, Justin, in Singapore. It was a great job. I'd worked hard to get there. And after coming to Dubai and just tail, between my legs and running back, I didn't want to do that. I was like, if I want to go back to Singapore, I want to go back to Singapore where it doesn't feel like I came to Dubai and I was just coming back. I want to have learned something. I want to go back doing something new that also felt like advancement, progression, change. I think that was very important to me. But it was also 2009, 2008. It was hard to get a job. And I guess the universe didn't have that in mind, because as I looked for jobs, and I was doing Socialize on the side, really, but it kept growing and kept getting better till I stopped applying for a job, because I knew that this was my calling.
That is so. I didn't realize how just from you speaking then, so parts of your story, I can relate so much to it. I can't remember if I've told you this, so forgive me if I have. But I moved to Honduras in Central America. So I had this really, I had a great career in London. I was working in an agency. I was working in content marketing for 7 years. And then for whatever reason, I just decided that I wasn't fulfilled enough. So I resigned on the spot. And rather than step in to look for another job, I decided that I was going to go and move to another side of the world, teach myself Spanish, and I became a teacher in Honduras in Central America. And I taught kids in the middle of the jungle, basically, English. And I didn't do much research on Honduras as a country before going there because it actually had the second largest murder rate in the world. I had a gun put to my head in this place, but it was beautiful. I mean, it was an unreal experience in many ways, but having done it for a year and it was a great success, and I left, and it's still one of the proudest years I've had of my life. When I got the call to move to Dubai, I didn't think twice about it because I'd already lived in Honduras, right? And because I'd had that experience. Now, from you talking about your experience in Singapore, then I was like, wow, I can relate so much to what you just said. And I stuck around when it was so rubbish, you know? And so did you. And and I guess that, you maybe even think about this when you were saying it. You stuck around because of your Singapore experience and what you did. So that's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And that's where you got the courage and conviction to go for it.
Exactly. And, Dubai was tough, but Dubai's been on such an interesting journey. I think you feel the same way because we've been around for a while. We've seen all parts of Dubai, but we've seen the growth. I think Dubai's given us the opportunities. When I decided to then go out on my own, set up Socialize and work out of my bedroom, well, that wasn't allowed. It was quite easy getting the first office and, then getting clients. Like we always met with such interesting people from all around the world, the forward thinkers, the ones who were the early adopters of social and Web 2.0 back then when it was called Web 2.0. It was a year later that we started calling it social. I think the best part of the journey has been less about the brands that I worked with and more the marketeers that I met along the way.
Yeah.
Because they were the forward thinkers that, really it was, we had a shared vision of the future, and some of those are still clients, some of those marketeers are still clients of ours today. And I think that's been one of the best parts of the journey.
I think what people might not understand who are watching this as well is back when you set up Socialize, it was true to say that this part of the world really was 5-6 years behind anywhere else. I mean, digital just was this. I remember when I would go and get briefs from clients, and they was like, and we got this thing called digital. We just don't, can you do that? And they'd sort of pump. I mean, no one really understood what it was, but knew they had to do it. And I remember when you guys set up, because it was, wow, there's this social only agency. I mean, wow, everyone was a bit sort of miffed by it. And of course, then international businesses we were working with started popping up with the odd random social media person. Actually, Richard Fitzgerald, one of our guests, he was one of the
and
first.
Richard used to work at We're Social.
There you
actually,
go.
He started there.
Yes.
Sorry. Yes.
So, so I don't think people can understand how pioneering that was. So when you opened up, I mean, who were you up against? Who was your competition?
Back in the day, gosh.
Not a lot, probably.
Yes, we did. Really, that first move advantage was such a catalyst for our growth, right? Our first client ever was, was me doing a talk at Knowledge Village. That was really how I started. I did a talk and did for free. And the next one, I got paid a little bit, and it was 100 people. And the next one was 200. And up walked a person at the end of the session and said, "Hey, here's my business card," which I just looked at and put on the side. He walked back and he said, he just looked at my business card and did I was so amused when he said that. I was like, what? He's like, I am the digital business director at Lowe. And I was like, okay. He said, do you know Lowe? And I was like, not really. He said, well, you should call me. And I said, okay. And I was so amused, and I called him and he said, well, I work with Apple, which at that point, Apple wasn't a part of the region. It was ABM, Arab Business Machine, if you remember. And he said, would you do some work with me in Arab Business Machine? Because he was the digital business director. He's the only other person who was thinking about social. No one else was. So we came up with a campaign for Arab Business Machine, which is called Switch to Mac. And fun fact is that, so we created a Facebook page, which I created back then. Social media, for any marketer who's listening, you missed the days when social media was putting up 140 characters on a message, no videos, none of that. And we created Facebook.com Switch to Mac. Fun fact today, Facebook.com switch to Mac /switch to Mac is the global Apple Facebook page, because when you type that on Facebook, it converts to the global
Amazing.
Apple Facebook page.
Amazing.
Because that was the first Facebook page ever created for Apple. I can't believe I still talk about that with this joy. But that's how it all started. And because HP saw what we were doing with Apple, we then had HP getting in touch. So it was really this forward. That's why I say the pioneers couldn't just be a pioneering agency. You need to be surrounded by the pioneering marketeers, by the pioneering recruiters, by the pioneering, digital business directors and agencies who saw it. And the region was ready for it, because as the years progressed, I mean, one of the things that's amazed me at GCC is even when we weren't a part of We Are Social, everyone in the world knew those We Are Social digital reports, the ugly brown slides that people have cut and used in their presentations. And you should look at the data, and top countries in the world for social media penetration, the GCC was always in there. So I landed up by mistake in a country that had only just started thinking about Web 2.0, wasn't even ready for social. And as soon as we came in and offered that, the floodgates opened, because the consumers are already doing it. One of the youngest, consumers or audiences in the world.
It's also a case of perception, isn't it? Someone might have encountered what you encountered, moving out to Dubai from Singapore, getting 30% of your wage cut. Some people would have gone, oh, just my luck, the worst timing ever. But actually, that ended up being the best thing that happened to you, because, as you say, you landed on your feet and you gave it a go, and you put yourself in that position where you were able to grow. And it's just such a interesting mindset that you've got there, that you managed to put yourself into the position where you were a pioneer rather than someone who left between their tail and their legs. And so tell me, the early days of those business. Now, I know, having sort of set up my business at the same time, it was it was tough at the beginning. There was I was cash flow in those days, getting people to pay you, being the salesperson, being the person that collects everything, having to hire when the talent on the ground, particularly in digital space. I mean, the reason I got a lot of business back in those days is no one had a clue about where to get digital talent from. I reckon I could have got a job back in the digital world actually back then, and that was when I was. Did
you not respond to some of our ads?
Do you know what?
This is what happened, because we had pretty good ads.
There's a chance. I'm sorry. I might have even applied had it not gone so well. I actually ended up, when I set up, and this is probably quite telling for what the digital landscape was like, I ended up having to go back to spending most of my time in the UK, because I could get business here, but there was no talent. So I was bringing so much talent out. And it was quite fortuitous, because a lot of people were losing their jobs in London, and I was finding them positions out here, which is, I think Richard and other people, they came out during that time. So that was how I got going. So I know how hard it must have been for you to get going. And you obviously, in those early scrappy days, you'd have just had to hire anyone at a good price and train them up, I guess.
Yes and no.
Go for it.
So yes and no. I think one, the fact that this all started, on Twitter, now called X, right? When the tweet went up saying Dubai's first and Middle East first social media training house launches, the people who got in touch were also the pioneers. The two people who interned with me back in the day, one went on to head social and digital at Omnicom. The other now runs a digital agency in Australia, I think. And these are two people who back then were so young, and also so 15 years ago, right? Got on social, saw that someone else was talking about it. So like attracts like. Pioneers attract pioneers. So I think that was really helpful. Through them, we met others who saw the work we were doing and found us. Second, because we were talking about social, we use social as a way to attract talent. So I did a lot of advertising. And yes, we did hire internationally, because that's where we felt we get the right talent. With everyone else, over the years, yes, it was a little bit of us hiring, not just anybody, but people who we thought had potential or a passion or an interest in the space, were reading on their own. We were teaching them. But I have to say, to be fair, we all learned together. I learned a lot with the people that I worked with as well. And I sort of missed that over time, because one of the ways in which our talent strategy changed after we got quite bigger, much bigger, is for some reason we looked back. We looked at the traditional agencies and felt, we need to start hiring from there because I guess they're bigger and they're doing all of the bigger work and campaigns. So I guess if we hire talent from the bigger agencies, we'll learn the other thing that we need to learn, I suppose, or what we don't know. And I don't think that really worked for us. When we did, Justin, you're like, I know this. I could have told you this. Well, okay.
Also, because I did exactly the same as well. So not only that, I think so many founders I've spoken to have made this mistake as well. Yeah.
Okay. Because that didn't really work. Hiring from
what you think of proper CVs, right? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It didn't really work because it kind of just showed me why the industry is changing and needs a change, and why social has such a different pulse to it and needs to be thought of differently when we think both about how we think of ideas, how we work, how we bring those ideas to life. That I felt we were going backwards, when that happened. So we pivoted our strategy again. And now, obviously, we only hire people who've got social and digital experience. Whenever we stray from that, we think it is a problem. We're also part of a bigger network now, which has opened up, and allowed us to hire the best talent. But yeah, it's talking about talent.
Yeah, I think someone told me this. It was a conversation I was having for a breakfast the other week, and they went, one of the regrets I had in business, and it's so funny you said that because I'm going to repeat, it's more or less a mirror conversation, is we didn't stay scrappy, this person says. And I said, well, that's interesting. What do you mean by that? And I'm thinking we didn't do the same as well. And he said, we got to that point in the business where I felt we needed to bring in proper CVs, that we'd matured. And I didn't feel like the team I had were the ones that were going to take the business onto the next level. So I started hiring proper people. And that's when his attrition rate went through the roof, right? And it was very interesting hearing that because I did exactly the same. And that's when my attrition rate went through the roof. And I've spoken to, and it's something I've thought about a lot. And I've spoken to a lot of founders and they've talked about different pain points they've had in their business, different stages of growth. And I think it's when founders reach that level of maturity in their business, and perhaps this degree of imposter syndrome as well. They think,
maybe,
you know what,
so
maybe
true.
I need to get
admit
someone
it,
in.
But yes. Yeah, okay.
So there you go. That's and it's just fascinating the way you just said exactly, more or less mirrored the conversation they had there that I had with that person earlier. So I think that's a real lesson for anyone listening to this in entrepreneurship is, you've got, if you create a core foundation in your business, never lose sight of what made you guys stay together, and that special sauce that kind of kept you guys together in the early stages. There will be times when it has to change and you have to upskill, but don't try and lose that scrappy culture, I would say. What's tell me, what's some of the key moments in the business in the early days where you went, wow, I would have loved to know, hey, when you went, your hallelujah moments, and we thought, God, I think we're really onto something here. And then obviously it wouldn't have been all particularly easy in those early stages. So you would have had your first taste of life as a business owner, giving you a smack in the face as well. I'd be interested to know how that went.
Okay, so I'm going to share one story, which is just really a funny one. And I think if anything, again, because it is one that's difficult to admit, but you must, be easily and constantly amused if you've got to, take on this journey. And also to show that so much of it is just learning on the job. When we first started working with HP, I hadn't been paid for a month or two. I called the client to say, I was wondering if you could help us get paid. And, the head of marketing obviously politely said, please just send us the invoice numbers. When she said that, I then responded, I'm really sorry. Our finance systems have crashed and I'm just not able to access it. Let me just get back to you. It'd be great if you could help us, because it is in the moment that she asked me for the invoice numbers that I realized what those numbers on the top of that Google template that I'd been using to create invoices were, because, I've got a little healthy amount of OCD. So I would just retype the same document and I would delete all of my emails after I sent it. So it would be inbox 0. So I didn't have invoice numbers because I was like, oh, that's what it is. Not a design feature. It's actually, that's what an invoice number is. So really that was an hallelujah moment, because then I knew what an invoice number was. And really everything I learned was from Google. But the other, I guess hallelujah moments were, I guess, when we first started, I think a lot of what I would say is perhaps the hallelujah moments linked to the technology evolving and us really starting to understand the power and the potential to drive innovation in marketing. When we started doing advertising, for the first time, we were one of the early, the early agencies were using social and digital advertising. We were one of the first agencies that were part of Facebook's agency program when it was first called, not even called the agency program, but the first real company that they interacted with in Dubai. It was an hallelujah moment, just trying to realize that how social, and this is something that has stayed true to us now, is social is not just about the community and conversations, and yes, it is all about the dialogue, but the real power of that technology is when you combine the art and the science. It's not only having something interesting to say, but it's being able to use the algorithm and the tools to make sure that that thing you're saying is seen by the right person at the right time. So that was an hallelujah moment. And we were working with Sony back in the day, who till today remains a client of ours. They were the biggest Facebook page. Remember back in the day, it was all about the Facebook pages. They were the biggest Facebook page in the Middle East. And we were very proud to be the people behind that Facebook page. But we had this unique insight into the algorithm of what happens when you have 3 million followers. But oh my God, from one day to the next, Justin, the post was seen by, I don't know, say 300,000 people. And suddenly they were seen by 3,000. So we witnessed that aha moment where, what? Just like that, reach dropped. So we knew how important it was to understand what Facebook said when they meant you've got to pay to play. And all it was for us is the North Star for us is helping brands not just get famous, but get rich, to reach the right people with the right message. So that was an aha moment, realizing the power of the art and science, the media and the creative working together.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And you just from some of the brands that you've dropped in already, I think it must be quite incredible for you to look at the logos that you were working with in the early days as well. Yeah. That's quite intimidating as well, I imagine, as well.
Well, it's a feature and a bug, I think, as an advertising woman, to say this. But it's never really been about the logos. For me, it's always been about the people behind those logos. Yeah. Because some of our clients or some of the, let's say, best brands that we worked with, it's actually marketeers who've taken us with them as they've gone to different businesses.
Brilliant.
So I think it's been the people. And like Sony, for example, their team today, it's the same team that was there over a decade ago. So what does it say about a brand and a business when it can retain its people like that?
Speaks volumes. I'm one of the things I found hard in the early days of growing a business was the actual growing a business part. No one had taught me how to manage people. I kind of felt like I was falling in, I in my journey, I enjoyed, I worked in an agency, I enjoyed recruitment, and then ended up by a situation, I ended up setting up a business, and then I'm hiring all these people and honestly, I think that was the bit that I found one of the most intimidating parts in the early days is managing people and dealing with
people-shaped problems.
Yeah, I mean, how did you? Because obviously, by the sounds of it, and you could probably tell us, your business group started to blow up quite quickly. So you're having to get lots of people in. How did you deal with that?
Well, people-shaped problems, they never fully resolve themselves, because I think as a leader, to be a good leader, as I've realized over time, is you've got to have this deep awareness of yourself so that you can be authentic. You've got to, to be the best leader and to inspire that in others. You've got to know yourself. There's some behaviors that are not helpful, and we are all still learning. So I'm still trying to learn how to be a better leader, because our job is to bring out, my job, as I see it, in the simplest terms, is probably finding potential in people and process. Like, that's the job in a sentence. So how do you do that? So it was difficult. You learn from experiences. But maybe we can talk about something that I've been doing some work on myself as a leader over the last 2 years, and something that I realized when working with my executive coach, someone called Goel, out of London, who I got introduced to after I became a part of We Are Social, and I think that was a gift. I needed it. It was a time in my life when I needed that. I worked with him, and he, as we started working together, at least I had the courage to say, I'd like you to go talk to every member of my leadership team and tell me what I don't know, what they don't have, what they're not able to tell me about my behavior. He came back after these interviews and asked me this question. He said, AK, what percentage of your leaders' times do you think they leave at the door? So how much of their potential, do they leave at the door? I said, none. I said, well, 50%. And that was hard to hear. I said, why? Because he's like, you have all the answers, AK. You're telling them what to do. You're giving them tasks. But your job is to give them the problems, is to give them the opportunity to solve the challenges. And it was just this moment where I realized what I had been doing and how I needed to change as a leader, and not to solve it all myself. You hire great talent and then you just let them be, give them the guidelines, tell them what you don't know, but give them challenges. So I guess on the hiring more people and learning how to bring out the best in people is a journey. And I think we all have to keep learning. We don't know the answers. I think it's good for leaders to invest in coaches. It's good for leaders to really, ask for feedback often. I've seen the CEO of our group do that after every meeting, ask for feedbacks. I think that's really important. So we all figure it out along the way. But as long as we invest in asking the questions, the answers will help us along.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Fascinating. Thanks for sharing that. I was captivated by that. I was just seeing, going, you're so right.
Yeah.
So look, what I want to talk about now, you mentioned We Are Social a couple of times. So I think it's only right that we kind of tell the story, the journey that led to the We Are Social, acquiring your business. And I think to frame it for people, I've always said the Middle East has been one of the I've always observed it's one of the toughest markets for an independent agency to build and thrive. I've seen, in my role as running a recruitment business, as you can imagine, I've seen countless come and go over time. And, it's been a bit of a graveyard, to be honest with you. So a few questions here. First of all, what do you think it was that allowed you to stay alive, the business to stay alive and thrive? And secondly, at what point did you think, or did they approach you or you approach them? Did you think we can build this as something that can be acquired and move into an international outfit? I'm fascinated by the journey. So go for it and tell us all about that.
Oh my God. When you ask, what was it that allowed us to stay?
Yeah.
So, I'm just going to, for a second, just take it and say, work bloody hard at it, Justin. We worked really hard. Yes, social, was getting into the right thing at the right time, but it was hiring the right people. It was really caring about what we did. It was the marketeers we had the opportunity of working with, and we worked really hard. And I, for one, did for many years, did 20-hour days. In hindsight, if I was doing it again, I would do it differently because it takes its toll. But worked really hard, and everyone else that we brought along did the same. A funny story is, as we were building and growing, I got approached by Michael, who used to run Dentsu, if you remember.
Yeah.
We had a good conversation. We talked about partnerships. I think he talked about wanting to partner with us or to acquire us. I didn't really know what that meant. We went back. He sent me an email saying, AK, here you go. Here are the 10 questions I said I would send you. And there were questions like talking about our revenue or profit, etc. I looked at those questions, and Justin, you won't believe what I said in response. I now laugh about it, but in response, I said to him, hi, Michael. You were the one who wanted to partner with us, so I think you should answer these questions. I had no idea why he was asking me these questions. Why would he ask me these questions? Why would I talk about, our revenue profit? And he replied back with an LOL and said, well, would you like to meet for coffee? And we met for coffee. He said, AK, you don't want to sell your business? And I said, sell my business? Why would I want to sell my business? We're doing great. And there's so many things I haven't figured out yet. I guess if we were to partner with you now, I understand what you're asking. You'd want us to grow faster. And I don't think we have the operational excellence to do that. I don't want our clients to get impacted. So it was such an odd conversation. He realized I didn't know what it meant to sell or why we would sell, and I never wanted to do that. But I also realized that I need to learn a little bit more about this. So I went to Harvard and did a course on taking your small business through its growth life cycle, which is where I was first introduced to the concept of M&A. Came back and thought, well, I guess now I'll know when someone talks about partnership, what it means. So there were two things that happened in 2017 that sort of kicked off this journey. One was we developed a Facebook Messenger bot for Mercedes-Benz, which was the first in the world, the first time someone had used Messenger's API to do that. In fact, Facebook presented it at their F8 conference and never talked about what an agency was doing back then. We won all of the awards regionally. We applied to Cannes, and people said, oh my God, if you guys get shortlisted, you will be the first independent agency in the region ever to get shortlisted at Cannes. And I thought we'd get shortlisted because what we'd done was the first in the world. And I woke up a little bit hungover, only to realize we hadn't been shortlisted. And that was an aha moment where I thought, but we've done it. We're already the best at what we do in the region. I wonder what I don't know. How can I learn? Maybe I should, learn from others to know what it takes to get to the global stage. And then YNR got in touch with us at that point for a conversation around partnership. And that's where it sort of kicked off. In some ways, I was feeling like I would love some mentorship. I'd love to learn what I don't know to take the business to the next level and for something to come in that could be the delta. And equally, we had, YNR that kicked off a conversation. This time I knew what it meant since they're responding with, why'd you want to meet? I started making a few phone calls to people to ask about what this could mean, who put me in touch with advisors. In fact, after I had a few meetings, I even went on LinkedIn to look up every founder that had been acquired by that network over the last year to say, I might be going on this journey. Would you mind getting on a phone call to help? And Justin, one of the things that still amazes me to date, and I think it's important for people to hear, is every single person I reached out to, every stranger in the world, got back in touch with me to help, because I think as entrepreneurs, we have this great desire to pay it forward. And I'm so glad that I asked the question because people did. I had good advisors and a good team around me. And that's when we went on a journey. I had multiple buyers on the table. I don't think I'm allowed to say who they were, but one of them was Blue Focus. And when Blue Focus's name came up, I jumped and said, yes, I'd be interested. And my advisor said, Blue Focus? Why? And Blue Focus is China's largest publicly traded marketing services firm. My advisor said, how do you know Blue Focus? And I said, I know because they acquired VR Social a few years ago. And the reason I knew VR Social is because I had Google Alerts set up for the founder, Robin Grant, because they were the only other agency that were doing what we were doing in the world. And I just needed some references. So years later, when Blue Focus came up, I said, yes, I'm interested because they acquired VR Social. And my advisor says, oh my God, what are the odds? I'm meeting the founder in New York next day. And the rest is sort of, history. We had them in the process. And I thought to myself, this is someone I had Google Alerts set up for. I would love to work alongside him and grow that brand story alongside mine and be a part of that team. And as soon as I joined We're Social, they invited me to be a part of the global leadership team. It was great to have a peer network, to have peers around me who'd gone on similar journey. I learned a lot through being a part of them, which I'd like to think I brought to my team, because as when we grow as leaders, our business sort of grows by what we're able to teach others. And it's been an interesting journey. There's been a lot of change, but I'm glad I joined them, and that's how it all sort of happened. And it took a year and a half. It was a long process. It takes a while, and it takes a village. But I'm glad I did it. Yeah.
If for some reason, I could say there's a lot of, you see a lot of stuff on LinkedIn or on social over the years, but I distinctly remember the post you put out when you were acquired.
Okay.
And the bit I remember, I don't know why I remember this, but it really struck a chord with me, is your CFO and you had been up like all night. And I remember you posted a picture of her, and I think it was around about like 4 a.m, or it was early in the morning. I can't remember the exact time, but it was very early in the morning. She'd been working all night to get the deal signed. And it goes back to what you said here, where the first answer to my question, you said it was bloody hard work, Justin. I put bloody hard, and I've not sat in front of a founder. And again, it's reinforcing this importance of this. I've not sat in front of a founder who hasn't worked bloody hard to get to where they are.
Fair enough.
And that's, yes, you can have a good product. Yes, you can have a good idea, but how you execute it and how hard you work ultimately always determines that. And you put blood, sweat and tears, and that's why you got noticed. I'm so pleased you said that at the beginning. But well, the thing I want to understand is you've kind of glossed over a lot.
What have I glossed over? Oh my God.
I guess it's just, that whole process. I know my wife sold a business, right? So I've seen firsthand how that process is. I mean, Helen went through due diligence, and hers was a digital product. But gosh, was it stressful, to watch, have your business get unpicked, questions asked, etc. Walk people through, because I think people will sort of hear, I got acquired. They sort of sudden think of this big sort of Hollywood-esque glamorous element. And I think it's very stressful for a founder to go through it. And there's a lot of things, not what a lot of people don't know is there's a lot of businesses that go, you get an offer letter. It doesn't mean your business is going to get acquired. Then you've got there's a whole process to go through, and it's extraordinarily stressful. And I'd just like to get a sense from you what you went through to get to that point.
It's so interesting. When you share that, when you get that offer letter, it doesn't mean your business is going to get acquired. I guess for me, the challenge was I didn't know if I wanted to get acquired. It was a conversation that I fell into, and I realized that it was helpful to go through this journey, because one of the advice, that I was given early on was someone said to me, it doesn't matter if at the end of this you want to go through the process or not. But what I will tell you from my journey and experience is going through this process teaches you more about your business than you ever knew. And I was interested in that. I wanted to know more about the business. I didn't know if I wanted to sell. So there was someone else, another part of the world, who said to me, when you have your advisors, they get a cut out of what you make on the deal. They want you to sell. Make sure you have someone else advising you that is not incentivized by you selling.
So true.
So my legal team was paid a fixed, had fixed pay, was someone called Darren Harris. And he would keep telling me, and I don't know if he realized it was designed for it to be. So he would just say, Eki, remember, you don't have to do this till the last day. The day that I was meant to sign, he called to say, remember, you don't have to do this. Let me know and we'll get you out of it either way. And I think that for me was very helpful, because as we went on this process, I genuinely wanted to find a good partner for me and for the business so that we may all grow together. I wanted to have mentorship, but with some autonomy. And I didn't want to leave, and neither did I want to sell. So I wanted to have a strategic fit, and that's all that mattered. It didn't matter if at the end of it we wouldn't sell. And in fact, our the deal got called off a week before we were meant to go live, go to press, because we lost a client, which was a big client, and that made We're Social very nervous. And when that happened, I went back home. I cried because it has been a year of my life, but I knew that it didn't matter. I would just go back to rebuilding the business, and it's okay if we didn't do the deal. Of course, they asked for me to fly down to tell them a little bit more about clients. I can imagine it made them nervous, but especially as I sat there for 4 hours in London with my own congressional hearing, it was me on one side of the table and everyone else on the other side wanting to know about our clients. I talked for 3 hours about our clients, and I realized I love this. I know my clients. I love this business. I will do it. I'll keep doing it myself, but also the advantage of doing this together with someone and, being a good partner, right? So it takes two hands to clap. But because they were nervous, I said to them, I would take a lower down payment, which meant that I bet on myself again, because I didn't know how we would do, but I knew that I would give it all. Yeah. And it's not just me and all the hard work I've put in. The fact that you mentioned a CFO who was up, that night, it sort of reminded me, there are also so many people who've gone on this journey with me, who believed in me, who've come on this journey. I wouldn't have done it without them. I remember sitting across our CFO who helped us and saying, she asked me, would you want to sell? And I said, no. Yeah. Never. And yet we did go on this journey, but she said to me she had it in her for one more. So we did it together, and actually poetically, she's going to be leaving our business next year. We've been on a good run, so it's a time of transition. So to answer your question, yes, it was hard work, but it was also everyone else. And this is how the story of We're Social.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. And I think I've spoken to so many entrepreneurs who've told me that they've become more successful when they weren't actually looking for it. Now, if I was sat on the other end of the negotiating table, the reason I say this, if I was sat on the other end of the negotiating table with you, and you've gone into this going, you know what, I don't need this. I love my business. Yes. If you want a piece of this, this is what we do. But if not, I'm happy to walk away. That would make me want your business so much more, right? And that's just the way it works. Yeah. So I imagine those 3 hours after that, that's probably why the things were sorted, the deal was done, because probably saw this incredibly passionate person that knew that she would be successful with or without those guys at the table.
I think it helped that right after that really stressful meeting, I got up, put on my gloves. It was April. It was so cold. And I said, drinks? I heard you like to go to the pub. Let's do that. So at least, culturally, it's so important to find a partner.
Well, I think I haven't met a person in England that doesn't say yes to that question. So fascinating story. Thanks a lot for sharing that. That's brilliant. So you guys, the deal's done, and you have to come back to work, everything, and now you've got to deliver on what you said, I guess, right? Yeah. And that's when the next chapter begins. So how was that coming in on the back of that?
Well, I think, I got invited to be a part of the global leadership team, which is great, right? So, you really have a sense of belonging, and the sense of belonging is really important when you acquire a company, for everyone to succeed together. plus the next few years were hard, but we were also at the top of our game. So it was good to sort of it was easy to build on that. Our clients appreciated that we are social, but because we are social wasn't in the region and gave me a lot of autonomy to operate. No one in our business was impacted negatively because I ensured that didn't happen. So the next year was great, which is 2019. And then 2020 happened and we had won. So 2020 was a very interesting time for us because we had won Expo. We were the official social agency for Expo, well, alongside Create. And I think you had Tom on the podcast and then came in later. But 2020 happened and suddenly we've got what was the clause called? I forget what the name of the clause is.
I can't remember. I just remember watching your what you put together on Emirates. That's what I do remember.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Loved to fly Emirates and all the stuff you would see that was done by our team. But suddenly Expo was on and then off the next day. And I couldn't even call the head of marketing and ask, when are we going to get back on? When will you start paying us again? Because I couldn't imagine what they were going through. But we had this entire team in our business that we didn't know what to do with because there was no
Was it
more...
on pause?
It was all on pause and pause indefinitely. So how do you pause indefinitely when you've got a team of 10, 15 people? You can't pause them indefinitely. So I'll say this one thing. That was a really difficult time for us, for the region, for the country, for the world. But we kept everyone on. We kept almost everyone on. And it was the strength of our balance sheet that allowed us to do that, but also having partners who were human beings who never said to us, well, you don't know when Expo is coming back. You've got to let them go. So we did a few salary cuts and it's giving me goosebumps saying this. We got to the end of the year and we returned back every penny. So any salary cut anyone was given, returned it. And I remember that year looking at my numbers, said, oh my God, I've never made such little money since year one of the business because that's how bad it was. But then we rebuilt from there. So I think they've been good partners. I've had a good run. I've learned. It's been tough times because, as we started to rebuild, I also wanted to rebuild myself and rebuild the business, which was, which would not what it was, but what it will be with new leaders. Yeah. And I know we work together with you to help find, the next head of the agency. And that's been quite a journey and I'm still on that journey. We've had some success with it. But the agency is on to its next phase as am I. So that's been the last 4 years in the making.
So COVID, I'm so glad you brought it up because everyone obviously brings it up. COVID, I remember having this call. I had a really tough year, 2016. I can't remember if I've told you this. Remember the oil price obviously collapsed in the Middle East, I didn't realize how many of my customers were connected to government spend. It was a real wake up call for myself. At one point, I had I think it's when I had 45 people here, and over a 3-4 month period, we lost 80% of our job orders. So I had all these people and all with it was really, really stressful, as you know. Managed to move quite a few to Asia. Some we had to let go of, but did my best with everyone. But meant that when COVID happened, I felt like I'd had my round one already. I was coming in for round two. So I had like an emergency plan, but I did crumble one night. And I remember that night I was sat at home and it was when I was in Singapore at the time. The lockdown kind of was coming into Singapore. I called up my business partner. I had a big whiskey in my hand and I said, look, why don't we just shut the shop, right? And do nothing and then reopen in 6 months' time and see what happens. And he went, well, that does not sound like you. And I woke up in the morning, I went, scrap that, we're not shutting the shop. I had my low moment.
Okay.
But we ended up having a blip. So 3-4 months, no one recruited. I mean, let's be honest, it was a disaster. Then all of a sudden, these green shoots started appearing. And businesses that we kind of had on the periphery. Our agency clients took a little while to get going, but these tech clients that we had, or the e-commerce businesses that we'd done like 1 or 2 placements with, obviously they were getting jet fuel thrown into them like they'd never had before. Yeah. So they ended up firing up. Now, obviously you've got a social and digital led business. I imagine you went through a sort of similar journey in the sense that there was a strong pickup afterwards. So how did things go after that? I'm quite fascinated how that post-COVID journey looked for you.
I think one of the things that comes to mind when you were talking about this, and I remember going back to 2020, could talk about how hard it was. We talk about how, because we had a strong balance sheet and because we're good partners, we were able to stabilize the business at the end of the year. But the other thing that we did in 2020, which is really a note to self, as I say this, never forgetting the importance of having fun and staying true to your essence. Because while all of this was happening, because we kept our teams, we kept our teams on, even though we didn't have that much business. What we did do during that time is really start experimenting and having fun with TikTok. We built a sound studio, and we were the first agency in the region to actually do that's a good. After COVID, not only did we pick up, it's about how did we pick up, where did we pick up, where were we doing work that no one else was. We did something for Bugles, which is called the Crunch It campaign, which was the most watched TikTok video in the region coming right after COVID. So I think because we're in the creative industry, it's also what is the work we're doing rather than just the work. And because we stay true to the essence of social, because we actually genuinely enjoy what we do, we spent that time during COVID also playing. And that play allowed us to then, after COVID, emerge with still when people think social, they think Socialize, still great clients. But now we've pivoted and we're focusing more on TikTok, having built a sound studio, which is really where you talked about e-commerce had jet fuel being thrown on them, whereas what has happened for us in social and so much of what we do is linked with platforms is TikTok was suddenly taking off, and it's a completely different aesthetic and it's a completely different way of being, and it's the TikTokification of everything. And I think we were ready for that change. So picked up slowly. A lot of the focus, or rather the differentiation for us, was really understanding that platform. Stable, long client relationships. One of the things that we didn't really do is work with the public sector. So I suppose we were never really, impacted in 2016. That's something that's changing now. We've seen some of our international brands suffer with boycotts after the war. Our business has suffered, our people have suffered, leaders have suffered. We continue to. But one of the things we realized is perhaps that as the Middle East starts its next chapter and Dubai starts its next chapter after Expo, that the ambition of the country, the government, the public sector can't be questioned. They've got ambition, they've got resources, they've got a desire to do more. And we've started now working more with the public sector. We won the Abu Dhabi Technology Research Council at the beginning of this year, which is working with all the research centers. They're the ones developing the Falcon LLM to compete with OpenAI, the robotics, the AI, the flying cars, the water taxis, the AI racing. It's like having a front seat at innovation. So I'm very excited about that and want to work more with the public sector. So our recovery has been slow and steady, some driven by platform, and I hope the next chapter perhaps driven with having being a real player in the region by supporting our public sector take the leadership role that it's taking in the world. So
nice. So one thing that strikes me with yourself and is that a big part of your identity, I guess, in Dubai has been to the business that you've created, and you've alluded a couple of times in this conversation about the person that you want to become as well. And so I'm quite intrigued how you see yourself evolving in, obviously Dubai is your home, is your long-term home now. All your family here as well.
They've moved here after I started the business. They
so
realized
everyone's
I wasn't going
settled
anywhere.
here.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what's when it comes to the future, and I suppose thinking about your journey in Dubai, I'm intrigued to know how that might, with the business that you've got, are you going to change that? Is there any ideas that you've got, or tell me a bit about how you see yourself evolving?
Well, we started the podcast with this when I said the person behind the card, and it's such an interesting title. And you don't see a lot of podcasts really trying to question and understand the person behind the business card, the person behind the business. And frankly, I don't think often business owners try and question the person behind the business, because we are about the business. So a lot of my identity is connected to Socialize. I never thought that was a problem. I loved it. I enjoyed it till I sold the business, and it stood there staring me in the face because I felt this sense of, I suppose, purposelessness. And I even admitted it to the team once, because I've been doing some work on myself. We need to have self-awareness that, oh gosh, I'm going through an identity crisis. I didn't think I would, but I am. And while I enjoy the network I'm a part of and what I do, I've just realized so much of my identity is connected to my business that I'm struggling now to introduce myself, because I'm like, is that still relevant? Who am I if it's not this? What happens if I want to do something else? And actually, can I do something else if I don't know who I will be if I'm not this? It's all connected. And I have to say, I'm figuring that out. It's been 4 years. The first 2 years were a little bit, why am I feeling like this? And the more people come to me and ask, what next? And I used to get triggered by that question. I said, what next is just this, bigger and better. No, that's not a great answer. Okay. And then the last 2 years, I've been trying to answer that question, and I realized that question and who I am and what I may do next comes to understanding who I am now. And I have discovered something that I will, share, which I kind of mentioned in the beginning. And she said, oh, astrology. It's nice when someone says astrology. So I discovered something called human design, something that my husband had come across. And a client that I spoke to at the end of a call asked me about, do you know human design? And I thought, I can't believe that someone else in the world is talking about it. Basically, it's a combination of the I Ching, Kabbalah, Indian Vedic sciences. And basically, it says that we're all coded at birth. Could believe it, not believe it. I was interested, I read up, and it's very mechanical. And for a mechanical mind, it makes sense. And it's just basically, I guess, an offshoot of astrology. And while you don't have to run your life with it, it sometimes gives you language to try and understand what's happening. And I think me, like many people, either because of COVID has awakened so much in all of us. We've all gone through change and are finding that we need to really figure out who we are. I'm going through a transformation. I'm going through my midlife crisis. And I think that transformation is realizing what doesn't serve me anymore and learning, to overcome that so that I may be my true authentic self in the next journey. And I think for me, it's a little bit of learning to be in the moment more and being okay with that, and to learning self-care. Well, it says so in human design, which even reading that, and what does that mean? For someone who's worked 20-hour days, to learn to be in the moment and find balance. And currently that's my challenge. I want to do that. And if I can do that, I think I'll bring more beauty into the world and know what that next chapter is going to be, whether it's with this business, whether it's with our clients, with growing the network. I have so many options and choices, but the role I play within that, I haven't figured out yet. So I'm taking a little bit one day at a time.
Sounds like sort of self-fulfillment. It's an absolute priority for us. And the lovely thing about what you've described, and again, this isn't something that's even come up. We've not even talked about money as a drive factor or anything. It's all about purpose, and fulfillment. And that's so important. It's the journey I've been on as well. I was telling you beforehand that I've moved into sort of coaching and mentoring.
Yes,
I absolutely love it. I absolutely love it. It's and that what purpose, fulfillment, being present, all these things I'm learning that I've probably put on the back burner for so long, just from just grafting,
Yes.
just absolute grafting, and wake up, right, I've got to do this, boom, 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 and not thinking about myself. And it's really interesting to hear you say that. And so thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and last thing I'll say is what you're doing with people, and it occurred to me, is you're mentoring people, you're helping people, you're serving, right?
Yeah.
And I think as leaders who've gone through this journey, we've been through entrepreneurship journey, we've grown, sold businesses. Next up is sort of not being the king, but being a kingmaker and helping the next generation, which you mentioned right at the beginning as well. And how do we help someone if we haven't, put on your mask first before you help someone else? So it's really to be able to serve, you've got to be okay yourself.
Absolutely.
And I think that's how you can serve the next generation of advertising leaders or the next generation of entrepreneurs. And I'm glad to see that people like you, I'm still figuring it out, but you're doing it.
Thanks a lot. Well, we're still figuring it out, though. Always still figuring it out, but that's fine. Keeps me young. Now, look, I think an important thing to also just talk about and touch on is the support network that you can have as well, and what goes on outside of business, because that is, in essence, probably keeps you grounded and that keeps you sane as well, right? So would you mind just sort of sharing what life is like outside of Socialize for everyone else, just so we can sort of understand, I suppose, what your support network looks like?
Oh, yes. It is important to talk about support network because I'm lucky to have a really good support network. My husband of 11 years, I think I would give him a shout out first. When I was young, I often said, I'm not going to find someone I can't live without, and I don't want to get married and all of that. And when I met Rob, I said, well, now I've found someone that I can live with, So with my peculiarities. And he's just been such a good support system for me. He gives me a lot of space. He's always there by my side. And so I'm lucky to have that. But I'm also, luckier that my family is in Dubai. So they moved to Dubai after they saw that I started the business. I wasn't going anywhere. It's great having them around. I can still be a child with them. And sometimes you all need some, love, nurturing, caring, healing. So they're around. My sister's around. We call ourselves #AdSisters. She works in advertising as well. So it's, fascinating to see her journey. So I have that support system. Plus I've got, the people who worked with me over the years. We call Socialize the boomerang agency. One, it's the McKinsey of the advertising world. Come in and often sometimes don't get paid that much, but you learn so much and your next step is going to be a big one. But a lot of the people come back and boomerang back to the agency. So I guess that in some ways is my support system as well,
And that is a really good testament to, I suppose, the culture that you've created at the agency. People want to come back, and that says enough. Well, look, it's been an absolute pleasure discussing your journey today. Thank you so much for sharing everything that you have. And I look forward to probably doing a part 2 and hearing about the next chapter.
Yes.
What's going on, what's going on next year. So we'll definitely put that in the diary. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
and I hope everyone enjoyed this. Please do press the subscribe button, and I look forward to hearing from you in our next show.